They were lined up neatly along the porch like offerings no one wanted. My old blue teapot peeking out of one, the quilt my mother stitched folded over another, the corner of my Sunday hat crushed beneath a stack of winter sweaters. For a second I truly believed I had walked up to the wrong house. But the wind chime by the door, the one shaped like a tiny church bell, gave its familiar soft ring in the breeze. It was my house, only the locks were different. I stood there in my navy church suit, Bible still tucked under my arm, staring at the shiny brass knob that hadn't been there that morning. My key felt foreign in my hand. I tried it anyway. It didn't fit. Behind me the neighborhood was quiet. Lawnmowers hummed in the distance. Somewhere down the street children were laughing. Life was moving forward, as if nothing had shifted beneath my feet. And then the front curtain moved. Just slightly. I knew who was behind it. I didn't knock. I didn't shout. I didn't cry. I simply sat down on the top step beside my boxes and waited. Before that Sunday my life had been simple. Not easy but simple. I had lived in that house for 32 years. My late husband Harold and I bought it when our son Marcus was just 6 years old. Back then the paint was peeling and the kitchen tiles were cracked, but Harold said, "Mary, this house has good bones." He was right. We built a life there. Birthday parties in the backyard. Thanksgiving dinners where the turkey barely fit the table. Quiet nights when Marcus would fall asleep on the couch with his head in my lap. After Harold passed, the house felt too big, but I couldn't bring myself to leave. Every creak in the floorboards carried memory. Every sunbeam through the dining room window felt like a blessing. When Marcus married Alicia 5 years ago, I was happy for him. She was ambitious, sharp, and beautifully put together. The kind of woman who walked into a room and made everyone adjust their posture. She worked long hours at a marketing firm downtown, always talking about deadlines and presentations and big opportunities. When their first baby, Ava, was born, Alicia cried in the hospital room and held my hand. "I don't know how I'm going to balance everything," she whispered. I squeezed her fingers and told her, "You won't be alone." And I meant it. When she returned to work 3 months later, I offered to watch Ava during the day. It wasn't a burden. It was a joy. I'd wake up early, make oatmeal with cinnamon, hum old hymns while rocking that sweet baby to sleep. When their second child, Jordan, came along, I rearranged my entire routine without a second thought. Alicia used to thank me. First, "You're a lifesaver," she'd say, kissing the air near my cheek as she rushed out the door in heels too tall for comfort. I'd wave from the porch, baby on my hip, thinking how lucky I was to still be needed. Marcus worked long shifts at the hospital. He's a nurse, always has been tender-hearted. Some evenings he'd come home exhausted, collapsing into the recliner while I finished folding tiny socks and stacking plastic cups. The house felt full again. Alive. I didn't notice when gratitude turned into expectation. It happened slowly. Alicia stopped asking if I was available and started texting. "I'll drop them at 7. She rearranged the kitchen without mentioning it. Spices moved. Cabinets reorganized. My favorite mug disappeared for weeks before I found it in a lower drawer. Little things. Small enough to ignore. One afternoon I overheard her on the phone. "She means well," she said, her voice tight. "But she's always here. It's like I don't have my own space." I froze in the hallway, Jordan balanced on my hip. "Always here." I told myself she was just stressed. Raising children and climbing a career ladder is no small thing. I remember those days, the exhaustion that settles in your bones. So I stepped back where I could. Started going home earlier in the evenings. Kept my opinions to myself when Ava threw tantrums over sugar or screen time. But something had shifted. Alicia began correcting me in front of the children. "We don't say it like that anymore," she'd interject sharply. Or, "Mom, that's not how we're doing bedtime." "Mom." She used to call me Mary. Marcus didn't notice at first. Or maybe he did and didn't want to stand between us. He's always hated conflict. Even as a boy, if 2 kids argued on the playground, he'd wander off instead of picking sides. One Friday night I stayed for dinner. I had made pot roast, Marcus's favorite since childhood. The smell of thyme and garlic filled the kitchen. Ava set the table proudly while Jordan banged a spoon against his highchair tray. Alicia barely touched her plate. Halfway through the meal she cleared her throat. "Marcus and I were talking," she said, not looking at me. We think it might be good to have more boundaries. The word sat heavy between us. Boundaries. I repeated gently. Yes. I mean, you're here a lot. And while we appreciate everything, the kids need time with just us. As a nuclear family. Nuclear. I glanced at Marcus. He stared at his plate. I only come when you ask, I said quietly. Alicia smiled, but it didn't reach her eyes. That's just it. I don't want to have to ask anymore. The room felt smaller. The air thicker. I understand, I told her, though I wasn't sure I did. From that day forward, I tried to shrink myself. I declined invitations unless explicitly requested. I stopped staying for dinner. I brought groceries instead of cooking meals. I told myself this was growth. That families change. But that Sunday morning, as I walked up to those boxes, I realized something else had changed too. Ownership. And not just of space. Of truth. The curtain moved again. This time the front door opened. Alicia stepped out first. Behind her stood my son. Mary, she said calmly, as if we were discussing the weather. We need to talk. I rose slowly from the step, smoothing the wrinkles in my church skirt. Yes, I said. We do. Marcus wouldn't meet my eyes. And in that moment I understood. This wasn't about boundaries. This was about erasing me. Alicia stood on the porch like she belonged there. Like I didn't. Her arms were folded, posture straight, chin slightly lifted. The same stance she used in photographs after work events. Confident. Controlled. Unbothered. Marcus lingered behind her, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. He looked tired. Not angry. Not cruel. Just tired. Why are my things outside? I asked, keeping my voice steady. Alicia didn't hesitate. We think it's time for you to move out. Move out. The words felt unreal. Like I'd misheard them. I live here, I said softly. She gave me that tight smile again. You stay here. There's a difference. Marcus cleared his throat. Mom, it's just temporary. We found a nice apartment not too far from here. We'll help with the rent. Help with the rent. I looked at him then. Really looked. This was the boy who used to run into my arms after school, face flushed and breathless. The man who once told me, Mama, I'll always take care of you. When did this decision happen? I asked. Alicia answered before he could. Last week. We've been talking about it for months. Months. And no one thought to mention it to me? Her tone sharpened slightly. Every time I tried to bring it up, you got emotional. I almost laughed at that. Emotional. Yes, I said quietly. Most people do get emotional when they're told to leave their home. Marcus stepped forward then, finally speaking with some urgency. Mom, it's not like that. We just need space. The kids are getting older. We need privacy. And Alicia feels like you're too involved. Too involved. There it was again. I let the silence stretch between us. I could hear the wind chime faintly ringing behind Alicia's shoulder. I raised you in this house, I said gently. I held your children in this house. What exactly am I too involved in? Alicia's composure cracked for just a second. You undermine me, she said. You comfort them when I discipline them. You rearrange things after I organize them. You're always here. It doesn't feel like my home. Her home. I looked past her into the hallway, my hallway, where I could still see the framed photo of Harold above the entry table. I never meant to make you feel that way, I said truthfully. I only wanted to help. And we're grateful, Marcus rushed to add. We are. But it's time for a change. I nodded slowly. I see. But what I saw wasn't just change. It was replacement. Where are the children? I asked. They're at my sister's, Alicia replied. We didn't want them around for this. For this. As if I were something shameful. The humiliation didn't hit me all at once. It seeped in quiet and cold. Neighbors could see my belongings stacked on the porch. Anyone driving by would assume I'd done something wrong. Did you change the locks? I asked. Yes, Alicia said without flinching. Marcus winced slightly. I turned the key in my hand, the one that no longer fit. And you didn't think to speak to me first? Alicia exhaled sharply. Mary, we've tried to talk to you. But you don't listen. I almost asked her when. When had she truly tried to talk to me instead of announcing decisions? But I stopped myself. Because arguing would give her what she wanted, a dramatic, emotional reaction she could use as proof. Instead, I bent down and lifted the box with my quilt inside. "When do you expect me to leave?" I asked calmly. Marcus looked startled. "Mom, you already expect it," I finished gently. "So tell me." Alicia hesitated. "We thought by the end of the week." I nodded again. "All right." Marcus's eyes widened. "That's it? You're not going to fight this?" I met his gaze. "No," I said. "I'm not. Because sometimes silence is more powerful than shouting." I carried the first box to my car. Then the second. Then the third. The weight of each one felt heavier than it should have, not because of what was inside but because of what was ending. As I loaded the final box into the trunk, Mrs. Patterson from across the street stepped outside to collect her mail. Her eyes flicked to the boxes, then to me. "You moving, Mary?" she called. "Just rearranging," I replied with a small smile. I wouldn't give the neighborhood a spectacle. When everything was packed, I closed the trunk and turned back toward the house. Marcus stood alone now. Alicia had gone inside. "Mom," he said quietly, "please don't make this harder than it has to be." "Harder?" I studied his face. The faint lines forming at the corners of his eyes, the exhaustion of trying to please two women he loved. "I won't," I said. He looked relieved. "But Marcus," I added softly, "you should have asked one more question before changing those locks." His brow furrowed. "What question?" I held his gaze just long enough for the weight of it to settle. "Who actually owns this house?" He blinked. "What do you mean?" I didn't answer. Instead, I reached into my purse and pulled out a small envelope, one I had kept there for years, more out of habit than suspicion. Harold had always believed in keeping documents safe. "Go inside," I said gently. "Tell your wife we'll talk tomorrow evening. Invite her parents if she'd like. We'll sit at the dining room table." He looked confused, uneasy. "Mom, what are you saying?" "I'm saying," I replied, my voice steady as stone, "that this conversation isn't finished." I got into my car and drove away before he could respond. I didn't go far. Just to my sister Clara's house across town. She opened the door before I even knocked. Word travels fast in families. "You all right?" she asked, pulling me into her arms. I didn't cry. "Not yet." "I will be," I said. That night, lying in Clara's guest bedroom, I stared at the ceiling fan spinning slowly above me. I replayed every moment of the past 5 years. Every diaper changed. Every bedtime story read. Every meal cooked. Had I overstepped? Perhaps. Had I loved too much? Never. Around midnight, my phone buzzed. A text from Marcus. "Mom, what did you mean about the house?" I stared at the screen for a long time before typing back. "Tomorrow. 6 p.m. dining room table." 3 dots appeared. Then disappeared. I set the phone down and finally allowed myself to breathe deeply. Because here's what Alicia didn't know. And what Marcus had forgotten. After Harold died, I refinanced the house in my name alone. When Marcus married, I offered to let them move in temporarily to save for their own place. They insisted on helping with bills and I let them, but I never transferred ownership. The deed was still in my name. Always had been. And tomorrow I would remind them. Not with anger. Not with revenge. But with truth. The next evening, I arrived at the house at exactly 6 o'clock. Not 5 minutes early. Not 1 minute late. I parked along the curb instead of in the driveway. The porch light was already on, though the sun hadn't fully set. It flickered faintly, the way it always did when the bulb needed tightening. Some things hadn't changed. The front door opened before I reached it. Marcus stood there, shoulders tense, hands clasped in front of him like a boy waiting to be corrected. Behind him, I could see the dining room table set with 4 chairs. Alicia's parents were already seated. Her mother stiff and silent, her father studying the room as if inspecting it for flaws. Alicia herself stood by the kitchen archway, arms folded again. I stepped inside. The smell of lemon cleaner hung heavy in the air. She had cleaned. Thoroughly. As if trying to erase my presence in one afternoon. "Thank you for coming," Marcus said quietly. "This is my house," I replied, my tone gentle but deliberate. I didn't need an invitation. The words landed. We sat at the dining table. The same oak table Harold and I bought at a yard sale when Marcus was 10. I ran my fingers lightly across a faint scratch near the edge. Marcus had made that mark with a toy truck years ago. Alicia's mother cleared her throat first. "Mary," she began carefully, "we're here because Alicia feels her space has been compromised." Compromised. Such a formal word for something so personal. "I see," I said. Alicia leaned forward. "This isn't personal. It's about boundaries. We are a family unit. We need independence." "You are a family unit," I agreed. "And I supported that from the beginning." Her father spoke next. "With respect, you've been living under the same roof. That complicates things." I nodded slowly. "It does." Marcus finally spoke. "Mom, you said something yesterday. About the house." All eyes turned to me. I reached into my purse and placed a thin manila folder on the table. The sound it made against the wood was soft, but it carried weight. "This," I said calmly, "is the deed." Alicia blinked. Marcus frowned slightly. I opened the folder and slid the document toward the center of the table. The official seal glinted under the overhead light. "After Harold passed," I continued, "I refinanced the mortgage and paid it off over time. The house has been fully in my name for 11 years. Silence. Alicia picked up the paper, scanning it quickly. Her jaw tightened. Marcus leaned over her shoulder. "Wait, but we've been paying utilities. We've contributed." "Yes," I said gently. "And I've always appreciated that. But contributing to bills does not transfer ownership." Alicia's mother shifted uncomfortably in her seat. Her father cleared his throat. "Are you saying they have no legal claim?" "That is exactly what I'm saying." Marcus leaned back in his chair as if something had physically pushed him. But we thought." "I know what you thought," I interrupted softly. "You assumed. You never asked." Alicia set the paper down carefully, her composure cracking just slightly. "So what are you saying?" she asked. "That you're kicking us out now?" The irony almost made me smile. "I am saying," I replied evenly, "that no one gets to change locks on property that isn't theirs." Her cheeks flushed. "That's a technicality." "No," I said quietly. "It's respect." The word lingered between us. Marcus rubbed his temples. "Mom, we didn't know." "You didn't ask," I corrected again. Alicia's voice sharpened. "This isn't fair. We've built our lives here. The kids have their rooms here. And I welcomed you here," I reminded her, "because I wanted to help you build those lives." Her eyes flickered. Guilt, maybe. Or frustration. "You're turning this into a power play," she said. I shook my head slowly. "If I wanted power, I would have used it yesterday." Silence again. I leaned forward slightly. "I am not your enemy, Alicia. I never was. I stepped back when you asked. I tried to shrink myself to make you comfortable. But I will not be erased from my own home." Marcus swallowed hard. "So what happens now?" he asked. "Now, that was the question." "I will be returning to my house tonight," I said calmly. "The locks will be changed back. And we will establish real boundaries, written, clear, and mutual." Alicia let out a disbelieving laugh. "You want a contract?" "Yes." Her father actually nodded. "That's reasonable." She shot him a look of betrayal. I continued, steady and composed. "You and Marcus are welcome to stay for 6 more months while you secure your own place. During that time, we will agree on shared responsibilities and privacy expectations. After 6 months, this house returns to being solely mine." Marcus looked stunned. "You're giving us time?" "I am giving my grandchildren stability," I replied gently. Alicia's shoulders sagged slightly. The fight was leaving her. "And if we refuse?" she asked quietly. I met her eyes. "Then I will begin formal eviction proceedings." The word hung heavy in the room. No one spoke for a long moment. Finally, Marcus reached for my hand. "Mom, I'm sorry." His voice cracked just slightly. I squeezed his fingers. "I know you didn't mean harm," I said. "But harm was done." Alicia stood abruptly and walked toward the kitchen. The faucet turned on. I could hear water running, too hard, too long. Her mother followed her. Her father stayed seated. "Mary," he said carefully, "she's been under a lot of pressure. Work, the kids." She feels like she's failing. I softened slightly. I never wanted her to feel that way. I believe you, he replied. Marcus stood slowly. I'll change the locks back. No, I said firmly. I will. He nodded, understanding the significance. Ownership wasn't just paperwork. It was presence. That night, I slept in my own bed. The sheets still smelled faintly of lavender detergent. The ceiling fan hummed softly. I lay there staring at the familiar cracks in the plaster above me. Alicia and Marcus stayed in their room quiet. No raised voices. No confrontation. Just tension. Around midnight, I heard soft footsteps in the hallway. A small knock on my door. Grandma, Ava whispered. I opened it. She wrapped her tiny arms around my waist. Mommy said you might be leaving, she murmured. I knelt down and kissed her forehead. Not yet, I said gently. And in that moment I knew this wasn't about winning. It was about teaching. Teaching respect. Teaching boundaries. Teaching that love does not mean surrendering yourself completely. The next 6 months would not be easy, but they would be honest. And honesty, I've learned, is stronger than any lock. The next morning I woke before everyone else. Habit mostly. Years of rising early to pack lunches, warm bottles, and iron little uniforms had trained my body to greet the sun whether I needed to or not. The house was quiet. For a moment I lay still and listened. The hum of the refrigerator, the faint ticking of the hallway clock, the low rush of cars passing on the main road a block away. Felt the same. And yet everything had shifted. I slipped out of bed and padded into the kitchen. The lemon cleaner smell had faded, replaced by the familiar scent of coffee grounds and wood polish. I brewed a pot the way Harold liked it, strong and dark, and stood by the sink watching light creep across the backyard fence. This was my home. Not as a weapon. Not as leverage. As memory. As history. I heard footsteps behind me. Alicia entered the kitchen, still in her robe, hair pulled into a loose bun. She paused when she saw me standing at the stove. There was an awkwardness between us now, not sharp but heavy. Morning, she said. Good morning. She moved to the cabinet, reached for a mug, hesitated, then chose one of the plain white ones instead of the floral set I used to favor. Small gestures speak loudly. I didn't realize, she said finally, her back still turned to me. About the deed? Yes. I poured coffee into my mug, steady hands. You never asked, I replied quietly. She turned around then, leaning against the counter. You let us believe it was ours. I considered that. I let you live here, I said. I never said it belonged to you. Her lips pressed together. Silence settled again. I felt like a guest in my own life, she admitted suddenly. The words surprised me. I looked at her fully then. What do you mean? You were always capable, she said carefully. The kids ran to you. Marcus listened to you. When I struggled, you stepped in so easily. It made me feel unnecessary. The honesty in her voice softened something in me. I never wanted that, I said gently. But it happened, she replied. And instead of saying it properly, I reacted. Reacted? Yes. Changing locks was certainly a reaction. I should have spoken to you calmly, she added, almost reluctantly, instead of making it about control. That was the first crack in her armor I'd seen in years. I should have asked how you were feeling, I said quietly. Instead of assuming help was always welcome. She looked at me surprised. We stood there. Two women who loved the same family, both defensive, both proud. Neither of us villains. Just flawed. Marcus entered the kitchen then, rubbing sleep from his eyes. Everything okay? He asked cautiously. For now, I answered. The next weeks unfolded carefully. We drafted a written agreement. Not cold, not legalistic, but clear. I would babysit 3 days a week instead of 5. Evenings were theirs unless I was invited. My room and certain areas of the house were to remain private. Major household changes would be discussed first. Boundaries. Real ones. At first it felt stiff, like roommates adjusting to new rules. Alicia kept to herself more. I heard fewer sharp corrections in front of the children. Marcus made a conscious effort to sit with me in the evenings, sometimes asking about Harold, about stories from his childhood. But tension doesn't evaporate overnight. One afternoon, about a month in, I returned from the grocery store earlier than expected. As I walked through the hallway, I heard raised voices from the living room. Alicia and Marcus. You made me look ridiculous, she hissed. I didn't know about the deed. Marcus shot back. You should have. I trusted you. I paused in the doorway. They hadn't seen me yet. Alicia's face was flushed, her eyes bright with anger. This was supposed to be our fresh start, she said. Instead, I look like the villain. Marcus ran a hand through his hair. You changed the locks, Alicia. I felt trapped. And now Mom feels betrayed. The word hung in the air. Betrayed. I stepped forward then. I don't want to be the reason you two fight, I said softly. They both turned startled. You're not, Marcus said quickly. Alicia looked away. I approached them slowly. This house, I said gently, is not the real issue. Alicia crossed her arms defensively. Then what is? Fear, I replied. They both fell quiet. You were afraid of losing control, I said to Alicia. And Marcus was afraid of disappointing either of us. No one denied it. I am not your competition, I continued. I am not here to replace you. I am here because I love this family. Her eyes shimmered slightly. Not tears but something close. And love, I added, should not feel like suffocation. The room felt lighter after that. Not fixed, but clearer. 3 months passed. They began searching for homes quietly. I didn't interfere. I offered advice only when asked. Ava started kindergarten and I attended the first day with permission, not assumption. The children seemed happier. Less tension in the air meant less confusion in their small hearts. But word about the lock incident had traveled further than I realized. One Sunday after church, Mrs. Patterson approached me near the parking lot. I heard there was some trouble, she said carefully. With your daughter-in-law. I smiled politely. Families grow through challenges, I replied. She studied me. You're handling it gracefully. Gracefully. If only she knew the nights I lay awake replaying that Sunday afternoon on the porch. But dignity matters. Because when you respond to betrayal with bitterness, you pass that bitterness on. And I refused to poison my grandchildren with resentment. 6 months approached faster than any of us expected. One evening, Marcus and Alicia sat me down at the dining table again. We found a house, Marcus said. Alicia nodded. It closes next month. There was relief in her voice. And something else. Humility. That's wonderful, I said sincerely. She hesitated before adding, we couldn't have saved the down payment without your patience. It wasn't quite an apology, but it was acknowledgement. And sometimes that's enough. The day they moved out was quieter than I expected. No shouting. No slammed doors. No dramatic final words. Just the steady scrape of furniture against hardwood floors and the low murmur of movers carrying boxes down the porch steps. The same porch where mine had once been stacked. I stood in the doorway of the dining room, watching as Marcus carefully wrapped the old lamp from the living room in newspaper. Be careful with that, I said automatically. It's older than you. He gave me a small smile. I know. Alicia moved through the kitchen with a clipboard in her hand, checking off items with efficient precision. She was composed but not cold, different from that Sunday months ago. Ava ran up to me holding her favorite stuffed rabbit. Grandma, can I still come over after school? She asked, eyes wide with worry. I knelt down and smoothed her hair. This will always be your grandma's house, I said softly. You don't need permission. She hugged me tightly. Jordan toddled past us, dragging a toy truck that bumped loudly against the floor. Life was still moving, just shifting. When the final truck door slammed shut, the driveway felt too open, too empty. Marcus approached me first. He looked older somehow, not in years but in understanding. Mom, he said quietly, I'm sorry. The words weren't rushed this time. They didn't feel defensive. They felt earned. I know, I replied. He swallowed hard. I should have asked more questions. I should have listened. I placed my hand against his cheek, the same way I did when he was a boy. You're still learning, I said gently. We all are. Alicia stood a few steps behind him, hesitant. When Marcus stepped aside, she faced me directly. I handled it wrong, she said plainly. I felt small. And I tried to fix that by making you smaller. There it was. The truth. I never wanted to compete with you, she continued. But sometimes I felt like I was losing. I studied her carefully. The sharpness in her eyes had softened. You are their mother, I said. That was never in question. She nodded slowly. I know that now. Silence passed between us. Not hostile, not warm, just real. I hope, she added quietly, that one day you'll trust me again. I considered her words. Trust, I said, isn't something you demand. It's something you rebuild. She accepted that. And in that acceptance I saw growth. When they drove away, I stood on the porch alone. The wind chime rang gently. For a brief moment, I felt the weight of solitude press against my chest. The house behind me seemed larger, emptier, but not lonely. I walked back inside slowly, noticing details I hadn't seen clearly in years. The scuff marks on the baseboards. The faint indentation on the couch cushion where Harold used to sit. The small height measurements penciled along the hallway wall. Marcus at 7, 8, 9. Time layered upon time. I didn't erase the pencil marks. Some things deserved to remain. The first night alone was the hardest. I set the table for one. Heated leftover soup. The house echoed slightly when I moved from room to room. I sat at the kitchen table with a cup of tea and allowed myself finally to cry. Not because I'd won. Not because I'd proven ownership. But because change, even when necessary, carries grief. I missed the sound of small feet racing down the hallway. I missed Ava asking endless questions about everything. I even missed Alicia's quick footsteps and heels as she rushed out the door in the mornings. Family isn't tidy. It's complicated. Loud. Sometimes hurtful. But it's still family. Over the next few weeks, something unexpected happened. Marcus started visiting alone on Sunday evenings. Not out of obligation, but because he wanted to. We'd sit at the dining table, just the two of us, talking about work, about fatherhood, about the pressure he sometimes felt trying to be in the middle. I thought staying neutral would keep peace, he admitted once. And what did you learn? I asked. That neutrality can feel like abandonment. I nodded. That's a hard lesson, I said. But an important one. Alicia began sending the children over for weekend sleepovers, something she had rarely done before. And when she came to pick them up, she stayed for coffee. Our conversations were different now. Slower. More honest. One afternoon she surprised me. I signed up for a parenting workshop, she said, stirring sugar into her mug. That's wonderful, I replied. I realized I was trying to prove myself instead of asking for support. Her voice didn't carry shame, just awareness. And I realized, I admitted, that helping without invitation can sometimes feel like intrusion. She smiled faintly. We're both stubborn. Yes, I agreed. But we're also capable of growth. Months passed. The bitterness that once threatened to take root never did, because I refused to water it. I kept my dignity. I kept my home. And most importantly, I kept my heart open. One evening, about a year after the lock incident, Ava asked me something unexpected. Grandma, she said while coloring at my kitchen table, why did Mommy change the door that day? Children remember more than we think. I paused, choosing my words carefully. Sometimes, I said gently, when people feel scared, they try to control things instead of talking about their feelings. She frowned thoughtfully. Did you get mad? I felt hurt, I admitted. But being mad doesn't always fix things. She nodded, satisfied with that answer, and returned to her drawing. And in that simple exchange I realized something. This wasn't just about property. It was about example. The way we respond to betrayal teaches the next generation how to handle conflict. I could have shouted, sued, shamed. Instead I chose truth, and patience, and boundaries. The house still stands. The wind chime still rings. The hallway still holds pencil marks from years gone by. But now, when I sit at my kitchen table in the quiet evenings, I don't feel erased. I feel rooted. When I think back to that Sunday, the boxes on the porch, the new locks shining in the sunlight, I don't remember anger first. I remember the feeling of being replaced. And that feeling can break a person if they let it. But here's what I've learned in my years as a wife, a mother, and now a grandmother. Love without boundaries becomes resentment. Boundaries without love become walls. What happened between me and my daughter-in-law wasn't really about a house. It was about insecurity. About pride. About fear of not being enough. And if I'm honest, there was a time I could have lost my son by insisting on being right instead of being wise. Owning the house gave me leverage. But keeping my dignity gave me peace. I didn't need to scream. I didn't need to humiliate her in front of the neighborhood. I simply told the truth calmly and let the consequences unfold. Sometimes justice doesn't look loud. Sometimes it looks like standing still while others realize their mistake. Today my grandchildren run through that same front door with laughter instead of tension. My son calls me not because he feels guilty, but because he wants to. And my daughter-in-law? She greets me with respect, not rivalry. It didn't happen overnight. Healing never does. But if you're listening to this and you've ever felt pushed out of your own space, your own family, your own story, remember this. You can protect your boundaries without losing your grace. You can speak truth without raising your voice. And you can choose strength without choosing bitterness. Tell me something. If you came home and found your life packed in boxes on the porch, would you have reacted the same way? Or would you have handled it differently? I'd love to hear your thoughts in the comments. And if this story touched you, consider subscribing. Because sometimes the quietest lessons are the ones we need most.